Growing up, conservation meant pure wilderness to me. It invoked images of vast landscapes with untouched ecosystems. Rhinos freely roaming the savanna, elephants crossing rivers and grazing without limitation or fencing. I imagined conservation as something that existed far from people, but throughout my time traveling across Africa, I began to realize just how wrong I was. Because everywhere I looked, the story of conservation was also a story about people. People whose families had lived alongside these landscapes for generations. People whose livelihoods depended upon them. People carrying histories, cultures, knowledge, and values that shaped how they understood the land. And people working through research, conservation education, and stewardship to understand and protect the ecosystems they are part of. The more I listened, the harder it became to separate the health of an ecosystem from the people living within it. And conservation wasn't something happening somewhere else. It was happening through the relationships between people and place, through the knowledge we build about ecosystems, the institutions we create to protect them, and the communities whose lives remain intertwined with them. I began to understand that humans don't exist outside of nature. We come from the land, depend on it, shape it, and are forever intertwined with it. And over the course of the past year, I traveled to South Africa with a single question. How can we bring together multiple ways of knowing to foster both human and ecological well-being and create a regenerative path forward? But to begin answering that question, we need to understand some of the challenges facing the continent first. Sub-Saharan Africa is experiencing one of the fastest periods of change anywhere in the world. Its population has more than tripled over the past 50 years, with another 2 billion people expected to call this region home before the end of the century. Nearly half of the world's multi-dimensionally poor population already lives here. And at the same time, biodiversity is disappearing at an alarming rate. A recent study published in Nature estimated that Sub-Saharan Africa has lost nearly 1/4 of its pre-industrial biodiversity, while populations of large mammals have declined by more than 75%. These aren't separate crises. They're deeply interconnected. As demand for food, employment, infrastructure, and economic opportunity grows, so too does pressure on ecosystems. Conservation can no longer be separated from human development or understood through a single discipline or way of thinking. Researchers describe these challenges as wicked problems, problems that resist simple solutions because they're shaped by interconnected ecological, social, political, and economic systems. There's no single definition, no perfect solution, and often addressing one part of the problem creates consequences somewhere else. So the question isn't simply, how do we solve these problems? It's how do we better understand them? I've been wrestling with that question for quite some time. In the summer of 2025, I joined Transec's Transdisciplinary International Learning Lab, based in the Regenerative Biosphere in South Africa, where I was first introduced to a transdisciplinary framework to better understand them. And one idea has stuck with me ever since. Our standpoint shapes what we see. The places we come from, the experiences we've had, and the values we all hold shape how we understand a problem and the solutions we imagine. A researcher, a farmer, a ranger, a conservation practitioner, a community member, they each hold a different piece of the puzzle when it comes to these wicked problems. And sometimes those pieces conflict, but often they reveal connections and opportunities we might otherwise miss. I traveled throughout South Africa recording long-form conversations for the Regenerative Way with people who see these challenges from very different perspectives. I wanted to understand where those perspectives collide, where they connect, and what might emerge from bringing them together.
Protected areas. Conservation should also happen outside of the protected areas where you do have human beings. Yeah, so because as humans, we interact with nature every day, and we do exist because we benefit from the biodiversity and ecosystem services that we get from nature. In the biosphere, so this way you do have 1.5 million people. If you're talking about the human-wildlife conflict, because when you do have these kind of national parks, there's wildlife, and then some of the wildlife, for example, elephants, come out of the Kruger National Park, and they cause conflicts in the community, like they can come out and raid a whole field full of crops. Of course, as a farmer, I won't be so happy with the elephants that are raiding my crops because they are interfering with my livelihood. But with us as the biosphere, we're trying to minimize that kind of a conflict by engaging with local communities, the conservation authorities, like what is that we can do to make sure that our people are safe, the wildlife is safe, the assets are safe. Assets we'll be talking about, maybe crops, they're safe. Yeah, so these are some of the issues that we are dealing with.
I know that, human-wildlife conflict is a reality on the ground for communities adjacent to the Kruger. I know that beneficiation is a big contentious point where people, ideally communities should be the first line of defense for protected areas, right? But how does that happen if communities don't see a value of being next to a protected area?
Yeah.
So it's like the whole system of fences. Are they there to keep the animals in or to keep the people out? Because anyway, what happens outside of the park influences what happens inside of the park.
What are some of those thoughts that come to your mind when you think about the times when humans did walk amongst these animals? Like what potentially did that look like?
Sure, I'm a realist.
Okay.
So that still happens now. There's still the Maasai tribes, they herd their cattle in open fields with lions around them. There's documentaries where you can see the lions are looking and they're looking at the Maasai. The Maasai is looking at the lions, they just all stick to the same thing. They're all using the same habitat. Realistically speaking, if it was living in harmony together, then we wouldn't have seen a population crash. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't think there was ever living in harmony.
Ever.
No. It can't.
Survival of the
Livestock's
fittest.
always taken preference.
Yeah. When people talk about, engaging with multiple stakeholders and perspectives, and you mentioned, historically they might have poisoned the vultures because human-wildlife conflict.
Yeah.
How do you approach, and like what are some of the tools that you utilize to be able to navigate a conversation where there might be that separation in perspective, but like we need to collectively come to an action forward that helps protect and preserve and
Yeah. I actually want to contradict you a little bit because
Okay.
I don't think it's a great assumption to assume there's a different perspective. Like when we deal with farmers, they're usually some of the most passionate people about nature.
Yeah.
They just happen to, they spend more time in nature than the average conservationist does. And that's kind of what was the eye-opening thing from my side, is I very much also kind of went, okay, we now have to convince people that like conservation matters and how do we get them on board? But they are on board, they just don't know how to be on board. Conservation, we all talk the same language.
Yeah.
It's very clean cut, everyone kind of we repeat a lot of things, I think. Whereas with farmers, there's like a different style of conservation that you can talk about.
Yeah.
And it's this long-term relationship building that's so crucial. If you can be in a landscape for 10 years, 20 years, dealing with farmers day in, day out and not see them as like a negative, see them as like part of the process.
Yeah.
It's incredible, like the buy-in.
The fences historically, like it depends who you ask. Some people, if you're on that side of the fence, they're going to say, oh, it's to keep us away from the animals. If you're on inside the fence, you're going to say it's to keep the animals safe, But I think in this area, we've got 4 million people right there. It's like having Nairobi National Park in Kenya, where you've got wildlife and then you've got millions of people and skyscrapers. Like that fence will always need to be up there. I think there are places where you could have the fence come down over time. And that does have to do with stewardship, understanding, benefit. Like huge parts of East Africa don't have fences, and there is like so much more integration, but you don't have the density of people that are living here. I don't know, Olot, would you want to see those fences come down, knowing what you know? Do you think we're ready? Could we be ready?
I don't think so, mate. Don't get me wrong. I'm not seeing fences coming down anytime soon, and I don't think it's gonna work. Reason being is that it's like, as I've said, people are gonna see these animals as threat to them, and what will they do? They will want to take them out, and we're going back to the system where we're gonna have less animals than what we have now.
In the community that I come from, with the natural resources that are there, with social structures that are there, I belong. And that has been the greatest radar for me throughout life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So a sense of place.
a sense of place.
Yeah.
I've never felt like I don't belong. And that's why I will always do everything that I have to protect our communities, natural resources, because it's where I belong.
Yeah.
What we're enjoying right now.
Yeah. This is a tough question.
Yeah.
But I think it really connects to what you were just talking about, and even where we're staying and looking at some of those paintings that are on the rock and thinking about this human interaction on this landscape and how far back it goes. And even what you're saying around your teachers or your sisters teaching you this relationship of conservation and stewardship. How do you see society getting back to a position of stewardship?
The science of which most people just say is the Western knowledge, and then we'll do have the indigenous knowledge system, right? So now the things that people have been living for so many years, I'm not sure how many years, could be millions of years, right? So what kind of knowledge were they using? Indigenous knowledge, right? Some would say it's called a local knowledge or traditional knowledge. People have been surviving.
Yeah.
And I'm here today because my ancestors had that kind of knowledge. Right, but what is quite important for a practitioner, could be a researcher, could be an academic, really, like if you want to go for biodiversity stewardship, it means you need to understand the local context is quite important. How do you understand the local context? It means you need to engage with the people in that community, could be a village, like any space. There are people who are residing in that area. They do have this wealth of knowledge about their system. It could be about biodiversity, could be about ecosystems, could be about climate, everything. You find that, those people have existed there because they've got this knowledge. Of course, we do acknowledge that some of the indigenous knowledge that have been used, maybe some of it might not be relevant now because of the changing climate, but as we are having this conversation, I think the issue of transdisciplinarity comes into place, because now as we are learning from each other, so we can now start co-developing new knowledge that we can use to make sure that we manage our systems.
Comes down. What does stewardship look like?
Yeah, it comes back to that phrase that John talked about, like the sign of a wise or an empathetic man or woman is to plant a tree whose shade you'll never know. Like, that's really what it's for, man, is to protect. Like, we've got these phrases here that we say all the time, out the system, next generation, but these are phrases that are important because they do encompass so much of that. And yeah, like my grandfather used to say, leave it better than how you found it. And I think that's true for here. Like, if we can somehow leave it better than we found it, or at the bare minimum, just leave it as we found it, to hand over to who's to come. And who's to come, like, it's not like there's going to be one day that they come and we leave. It's it's really gradual. It's really gradual. It's like the moment you bring your family in, or I bring my family in, and it's the first time or the 12th time. And then, it's this very like long time scale journey of this handover process.
I went to South Africa to explore how we can bring together multiple ways of knowing to foster both human and ecological well-being and create a regenerative path forward. What I came away with was not a single answer, but a deeper appreciation for the knowledge, experience, and relationships that already exist. Co-management, two-eyed seeing, polycentric governance, and human-wildlife conflict, none of these ideas or challenges are new. There are decades of research, practice, and lived experiences pointing towards different ways forward. But what's difficult is putting these ideas into practice, because bringing together different standpoints, values, knowledge systems, and lived experience to the same table can often be messy. There are tensions, disagreements, and no simple answers. And I think that's where transdisciplinarity fits best. It's not meant to be clean or seamless. It's about willing to be wrong, to listen, to iterate, and to adapt. These natural systems and our connections to them are inherently dynamic, and so must be our responses. Throughout these conversations, I was left with a profound sense that we often only protect and steward the things that we're in relationship with, but that relationship needs to be cultivated through education, experience, and connection to place. And for me, that's where transdisciplinarity matters. Not in finding one right answer, but an understanding that every place has its own context, relationships, histories, and people who hold a stake in its future.